Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. So the other day, I was asked by some newer IDs who just published their very first courses on their company's LMS the question, why does so much of our training fail? And they asked this because they weren't getting a lot of engagement on their courses, and the post-training surveys were a bit bleak. And honestly, the direct answer is very simple, so I'll boil it down to one sentence. Training is not just about the content. But unfortunately, it's often treated that way. And as a result, we end up with the reality where we spend more time just pumping out PowerPoints, learner guides, job aids, storyline and rise courses, and training videos without ever really thinking about why we're making any of those things. And starting out, most IDs are taught a very tools first mentality, which is actually doing them and the industry as a whole a huge disservice because the tools ultimately aren't that important. They're just the visual representation of what should be a thoughtful process which solves training problems. And which tool you use is going to vary based on the project at hand. What shouldn't change, though, is the thoughtful analysis and design of training, which happens long before actual development. And ultimately, effective training is about behavioral change, application of new ideas or workflows, as well as the context of the problem at hand. It should not be merely about delivering information. True learning requires engaging people through measured practice, feedback, and relevance to their daily work, rather than just passively consuming content. If that's all it was, then the learner could just Google the information instead of having any learning and development team. By thoughtfully having relevant work that challenges them to be better and educates them on ways to overcome training problems, you'll find that learners will often have much better information retention and skill development. Not to mention that they will see the relevance in taking time out of their day to do the training and will trust you more with the next training you make for them. Securing those relationships with learners, stakeholders, and SMEs alone is absolutely invaluable and will actually further make it so future trainings will be successful in meeting whatever they need. They will also be more willing to communicate with you and help you in crafting the best training possible, which takes into account context and relevance, active practice and feedback, application over information, and will encourage a culture of learning with continuous learning loops at the company. Basically, though, training must be tailored to the learner's environment and business needs. If you're just churning out work which could be created by AI, like a lot of compliance training these days, then you aren't really creating something that actually makes learners believe that you know what they need. Way too many IDs fail because they just make training in a vacuum rather than talking to the right people and finding out what the real core of an issue is so you can better design a training which not only solves the problem but also makes the company money. It's effective and also a bit of job security on top of all of that. And following this thought, the design you create needs to be at least somewhat active. When I reviewed these courses by those newer IDs, this is a major area where they suffered from because they were mostly the next button style courses. Now, importantly, sometimes those are just unavoidable. But the best training is when you have learners actually doing something or following the new workflow that you're giving them. Even if it's as simple as having them click on the button in the program that triggers the next part of the training, that is often just enough interactivity because then they get to actively practice what they're expected to now do and feel at least a little like they're part of the training. A self paced course should not be like sitting through a boring lecture where someone just talked at you from a lectern all day. Training like that will almost always fail because you should be using the time you have with the learner to highlight the real problems they're facing and how to fix it, rather than just presenting facts to them that they have to read or listen to for 45 minutes. By doing all of that, you create a learning culture at your company where people feel safe learning new things. They can get quality content, and which allows them to feel seen. Something I made a whole video on last year, actually. If your learning doesn't do that or can't do that, then learners will reject the training regardless of how much time and effort you put into it. So keep that in mind. I guess my point is that ultimately, training fails when it is treated and approached as a one size fits all information dump. And that is unfortunately what a lot of training is these days. People ultimately equate training with those incredibly dull and uninteresting compliance courses you take when you get hired that cover things like information security and sexual harassment. My favorite one was always that annoying bloodborne pathogen training I did it as a teacher every year, which was just so dull and boring. They may have a lot of great information in them, but they're uninteresting and people tune them out as fast as they possibly can. On the other hand, training succeeds when it fosters relevant connection to the content and trust because the course focuses on the why and how of behavior change rather than the what that the content plainly is. Both the learning and the crafting of the learning should be done holistically. Training is not inherently learning. Learning happens as a result of effective training. And all instructional designers or learning development professionals in general need to check themselves on that from time to time by ensuring that they are actively thinking about these things before they ever even open an authoring tool. That is what separates mediocre instructional designers from effective ones who focus on tools or ones who focus on design, analysis, and actually solving training problems. So don't forget that. Well, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please consider liking and subscribing. Believe me when I say every person really helps the channel grow and get these videos out to a wider audience, and it appeases the YouTube gods. So any and all help is greatly appreciated. For now, though, I've been Kevin, and I will see you in the next video.